Morning, gents. How are we all?
Morning. Very good.
Excellent, excellent. I'll get each of our panelists to just say a little bit of who they are and their view on where the energy future is going. So, can I start with you, Gab?
I'm from British Gas Business, so not the residential side, so there'll be no penguins, Wilbur penguins today, but there are some penguins of sorts outside. You'll notice that there are some hosts with their little blue lanyards and iPads. For those of you who are interested in knowing everything that's going on, but you want one source to be able to give you that, they're available to show you around, and if you want to speak to anybody else in particular, they'll make the connection. So we're trying to be as agile as we can. That's the first bingo innovation word I'm going to use today. Firstly, what a great venue. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to have lots of great partners to share the process with us of getting immersed in innovation. I'll leave you with 3 provocations or 3 thoughts for the day. The first one is that I think earlier this year, or even now, Tesla, which sells 80,000 cars a year, has a market capitalization greater than Ford that sells 2 million cars a year. So the first thought there is that energy is transforming businesses and can transform yours. The second point is that in March this year, the net demand during the day was less than the demand for energy during the night. Now, a lot of that is because of solar power, but the way in which the grid operates today is fundamentally changing. Therefore, the way in which energy is bought and sold and used is going to be fundamentally changing. The third provocation for you is that large users like yourselves spend around £20 billion of energy in the UK. We believe that you can cut 10 to 20% of that spend by putting in new innovation and technologies which are available outside this room today. So get out there and find out. For those of you who are looking for the statistic, that for those of you in the room, I think you represent £2 billion or 10% of the UK's large energy spend. So that's a £400 million of opportunity for everyone in this room. So I'm looking forward to talk and engage and understand a lot more about how we can get after that. I have a session later at 12:30 to give a few more thoughts. It's interactive, so I'll be asking and talking to a lot of you and getting some, asking some questions and getting some feedback from you. So that's all I really wanted to say.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Gab. Stephen, a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your vision of the energy future, please.
Okay. First thing is we are not a sort of energy version of Take That. It kind of feels like we're on. But, okay, so Stephen Church, I am a partner at EY and I look after the energy market in our consulting business. What does the future look like from what we see, what we do with our clients? I'll sum it up in kind of 4 things: decarbonisation, decentralisation, some innovation, and then we've got some geopolitical stuff going on. Take each one in turn. When it comes to the decarbonisation, it's about how are different technologies, how are we moving ourselves away from the sort of the drug of fossil and more into what does it mean for more renewable technology and adoption. And we've seen that as we get more engaged in adopting, whether it's wind, solar, and looking to combine that with battery storage, what we're seeing is that the adoption is meaning that the cost is radically falling. Hence, as we get more adoption, that mix is going to change. That will then lead into that second point around what does it mean for the grid and that decentralisation. So what we're doing, seeing a shift from traditional value chain models from generation transmission all the way through to businesses or in the home, back more into the what does it mean if communities start to look after themselves or clustering starts happening across whether it's postcode areas or geographical areas, virtual power plants, etc. So a lot of change around that decarbonisation, decentralisation. Innovation, we've got the rise of big data. You can't go anywhere these days without hearing things like big data, analytics, robotics, Internet of Things, blockchain. Come to the EY session later on, you find out more about that, good plug. But it's those combinations of innovations. It's what I'll call traditional IT, being able to do more with IT, but also being able to do more with different technology types and the adoption of such. is going to change business models. It's going to change the way we interact and use energy, consume energy, trade energy. So that whole value chain is being disrupted. And then I think you've got the fourth point I mentioned is around that geopolitical landscape. We've all heard about Brexit. We've got an election in the UK tomorrow. We've had Trump and his announcements, not just becoming president, but also his announcements about the Paris Accords and what does that mean. So that whole uncertainty is going to question the pace at which a lot of this innovation can be adopted and how that will disrupt the markets that we all live, operate, and sort of exist within. So.
Thank you. Robert, why are you here?
My name's Robert Llewellyn. I do telly nonsense, but some other things as well. For the last 6 years, I've been running a weekly, I don't know what to call it, a show on YouTube, Facebook, and now Amazon Prime about electric vehicles and the future of energy and transportation. It's become extremely popular. I'm very proud of it. It's working, which is a big surprise. A lot of people watch it, which is really good. But I don't know, I'm just going to ask I want a quick hands up if anyone saw a BBC documentary called The Great Village Green Crusade that was on last Thursday. Oh, good. Look at that. I think that is probably a good representation of the viewing figures. So I reckon so that was a documentary I spent the last 2.5 years making about the village I live in. I live in a very small village, 62 houses in the Cotswolds. It's called Temple Guyting. I used to keep that secret so that Red Dwarf fans didn't find me. It's too late now. Where we've got together as a community to try and install community-owned renewable energy sources. And the main driving reason behind that was my very obvious understanding. I'm very lucky I have a south-facing roof that I've got 5.5 kilowatts of solar on. A lot of the roofs in the village that we live in are completely unsuitable for solar because there's a lot of trees, because the houses, our neighbouring house is in the Doomsday Book, and apparently slapping solar panels on a stone roof of a house that's over 1,000 years old is frowned upon, and I think rightly so. But there's dirty old modern barns just outside the village, which is where we're installing some solar, and it means that even if you can't put it on your house, you can have a share of it. So it's very much about that whole move towards community energy. And speaking very much as a punter in this, I don't work for any company that has anything to do with the energy market, but as a punter, I'm very aware of the interest of the community that I live in, who have really been on a very steep learning curve because they didn't know, most of them didn't know what a kilowatt hour was, they didn't know what a unit of electricity meant, they knew how much they paid for the electricity. They are now obsessively talking about their usage, about their LEDs that they're installing, about better insulation, about more energy efficient homes, about owning bigger solar. All the farmers around us are desperate to put in 15 kilowatt wind turbines, which everyone thought no one would want wind in the Cotswolds. They all do. When they see the spreadsheet that explains how quickly it pays back and starts making money, it changes a lot of people's minds very quickly. The poshest man in the village, who was very opposed to wind turbines, when he saw the spreadsheet, he went, I think wind's probably a very good idea. It was an instant, it was a switch. I'm very excited about that. I drive electric cars, they work, they make a big difference. I drove here today in a Tesla Model S, which is a ridiculously expensive car. It's also known as Robert's pension. Because I really can't afford it, but it is an amazing machine. And as you were mentioning about Tesla, there's just an extraordinary statistic. No, I didn't even know this. My dad was born in 1922. That was peak horse. I don't know if you knew that. That was the most horses that we've ever used as the human race to do transportation and deliveries. It was peak horse, and by 1928, they completely disappeared off the streets, other than very occasional ones that pulled beer. It was an incredibly fast change, and that was from the introduction of the motor car. And I think that as generally the public are not aware of how fast the changes that are taking place, the stuff that we're discussing here today, and how quickly that's happening. And I'm trying to keep up with it. It's my job, effectively, to keep up with that news. It's impossible. It's 600 tweets and emails an hour I'm getting about breakthrough technologies. It's extraordinary what's happening.
Excellent. And of course, I'd never thought I'd hear the words peak horse, but hey, why not? Alex, or shall I say, sorry, Monty.
That's okay. Thank you. So, good morning, everyone. My name's Monty, and I work at Microsoft, where I lead the Internet of Things and AI business. Working for Microsoft, I'm going to pivot to Stephen's third pillar, quite obviously, which is very much around technology. There are a lot of examples of how technology is changing the landscape, some of which we alluded to already through solar. We think about the sort of vehicles, electric vehicles, and thinking about the way that technology will only accelerate at pace in terms of driving better battery technology for better range, costs will come down and so on. I'm going to say an obvious one, however, which is the cloud. And you say, well, I would say that working for Microsoft, but we are truly seeing the cloud representing a significant opportunity for organizations of all shapes and sizes to not only do things differently and have access to new capabilities that previously were the sort of preserve of maybe some tier one banks, pharmaceuticals, and some academic institutions. So I'm thinking things like machine learning and artificial intelligence, but actually really crunch the data. And that's really where Microsoft sees the future of a lot of sectors, a lot of industries going, the value that sits within the data, and the opportunity that organizations can actually take advantage of to understand their data. So I think about things around sort of smart sensors, the ever decreasing cost and increasing availability of sensors of different types, shapes and sizes, the ability to connect those sensors up and actually perform sort of predictive analytics, so whether that's remote monitoring and predictive maintenance of assets, or indeed things like demand forecasting. Now, demand forecasting in my view is not just around power consumption and so on, although clearly that's a hugely important topic, but also human demand forecasting. So thinking about taking different data streams such as weather patterns, maybe engineering analysis, predictive analytics, and putting engineers and people in the right place before a potential spike in demand so that you can service the requirement more effectively and actually at a lower cost and more effectively and more efficiently as a business. So the ability to really understand trends in the data and the opportunity that cloud affords around that, I think lends itself very, very well to the sector. One other nice example I'd like to leave with you before I pass back is the concept of using data. Well, we have engineers on a wind turbine, and this is a real customer case in Canada. They actually obviously want to predict maintenance and actually carry out proactive maintenance on the actual asset, the wind turbine. But they wanted to sort of minimize the security risk, the risk to their engineers who are actually walking out on the blades, however many 100 feet up in the air. So predicting the optimum time to carry out the maintenance based on that sort of data is just another example of how organizations really are thinking of the non-traditional sense of data and exploiting it for value outcome. So that's really the trends that we're seeing.
Excellent, excellent. Right, this is how it's going to work, ladies and gents. We're going to have a chat for about 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to open it up to questions. All I ask is you just wait for the microphones, which will come, and please say who you are, where you're from, and what your question is. One thing we're going to say, which is talking about technology, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a little iPhone just here at the front, and we're broadcasting this live on Periscope. And when I started in the BBC in 1993, that would have meant a massive truck with loads of blokes going, no, mate, I can't hang it there. And, it would have been thousands of pounds of kit. And it just shows you that you can now do live transmission from an iPhone. So the way that technology is driving is going to radicalize everything we do. So let's start with something which has been bugging me. And we'll cover a few things here and then obviously time to questions. I don't mind who answers this, but are we seeing a change that this sector and the people in this room who may have come from engineering backgrounds will soon have young people working for them who are mathematicians, IT people, marketing people, people from various different organizations, because technology, telecoms, and data is going to be the biggest driver for energy. Who wants to take that one?
Let me start with that. I think if I look at it from even just a recruitment perspective and engaging with talking to our clients, it's data scientists. That's the human capital that people are looking for. What is the data telling me? How can I structure the data? How can I understand what the data's telling me so that I can make insightful interventions in my organisation? And that's not necessarily just energy. I'd say that's every single sector. Whether whether you're a consumer of energy or you're an energy supplier. So I would say it's the transition into the more data scientist and that rich insight given from that population. And if you look at some of the more disruptive platforms that are out there, things like Top Coder, if you've not heard about it, it's how do you get access to virtual talent without necessarily having it inside your organisation. They offer skills from coding and producing apps all the way through to ability to launch marketing campaigns. their largest cluster of a population of talent as it is in the data science space. And believe it or not, most of it is based in St. Petersburg, because I believe a fallout from Soviet investment times was the insight and data structures and data modeling that happened in pre-communist Russia.
Gab, who are you seeing coming along, the young grads, the people who are, is it changing the face of the people you're recruiting and also the people that you see as your customers?
So on average, we are seeing a lot more investment in obviously digital skills. So how we communicate is now is less on the phones, less through letters, less through traditional sources. It's now digital, it's email, and a lot of that requires new capabilities that, I'll use the word younger. I don't want to offend anybody in the room. There's a lot of very sophisticated people who are a little bit more not young. The other one is data science. And so we are investing a lot more in people who can look at the data, whether it's smart data, whether it's sensors on machines that produce alerts and therefore allows you to act on that, and less in terms of what would have traditionally been investment in engineering. There is still a lot of investment in engineering around new technologies, and you'll see some of those outside today, whether it's battery storage or CHP. Those are developing. But in terms of a net, there is a lot more data science, a lot more digital, a lot more of those capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, Monty, you're from the world of that. But if you can see Microsoft does a lot in the energy field. People perhaps are not aware of that. Are you seeing a change in the shift of the questions that people are asking? Because it used to be, well, I don't know, I'm going to ask the IT man to talk to you. That's changing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. It's very much, it is business-driven conversation and business value outcome. I want to very quickly pick up on the one thing around the data science piece, if I may, before I come back to that question. So we're seeing a lot, with the technology that we provide, a lot of focus on data science. I completely agree. What I would say, however, is that the data scientists don't necessarily, they're excellent at understanding the data, but they still need support and guidance to actually drive the business outcome, or actually understand exactly what it is that they're looking for sometimes. So there is definitely still a space. Let's not say that the world is going to be taken over by data scientists, because that's absolutely not the case. And we have a lot of examples where people are investing in that. The data scientists in the data science capacity, they're looking at driving efficiencies, taking out inefficiencies, optimizing processes, and very often they'll uncover new revenue opportunities for organizations. And then they require engineering and business to actually to model how to exploit that opportunity. So I would say that they should be seen as an enablement function within the business to really understand and exploit the data that you're capturing. But back to the point, the question that was made, I guess, very much a business value conversation. I'll just kind of dovetail the two together. It's how technology can really enable agility, change, transformation. You know, we all hear about digital transformation. It's the thing in the market and has been for a number of years now. A lot of that is facilitated by technology. So the ability to optimize your operations, the ability to transform products and services, the ability to make employees more productive, enable them to do their jobs more efficiently, more effectively, using new technologies, using mobile, using productivity tools from the cloud. So technology is a key foundational element, I would suggest, that we're seeing to drive that business value outcome that the customers are looking for.
Yeah. Can I just get a quick show of hands? How many people feel technology is slightly overriding them, coming into their jobs and they're not comfortable with it? Hands up. Only one brave person. So most people are capable, are they? They're finding that the technology that's coming in is not an issue for you guys when you're doing your energy management. That's really interesting. Where are we going to get our energy from? And I don't want you to say asteroids yet. I know what you're thinking.
I'm not going to say asteroids.
Where are we going to get it from? So obviously we've had the Paris Accord with Mr. Trump. We've had a change in shift of where the Middle East is with Masdar City generating loads of solar. We've had a whole stuff about how solar has overtaken on that day, particularly last month. But if we look at where we're going, whatever we say, fossil fuels, we're still a fossil fuel dependent planet at present. But people are looking at different forms of tech. Do we believe, panel, that energy sources are going to be the biggest change that we see? Or is it really energy management and things like the internet? And we're pretty much where we are when it comes to energy sources.
Can I try and answer
Go on,
that
then.
as a total rank amateur outsider? But what I do see that a shift has already taken place. So those statistics about the drop in demand, it took me a while to understand what that was, and it was because solar isn't measured in terms of its gigawatts of input. With 13.3 gigawatts of solar in this country, which is effectively 2.5, not more, Hinkley Point Cs. Obviously only when it's sunny, and obviously when it's cloudy, and all the things that you can imagine my Twitter stream, whenever I mention any of this, is a torrent of fossil worship. That's the only way I can describe it. But I think it's absolutely a combination of those two things. So that's the bit that it is hard to understand, but it's the communication between systems. So when there's a very big cloud in Dorset, it probably is quite sunny in Norfolk. And when it's really dark and cold here, it's not in Morocco. And it's those things, and it is that interconnectivity that is vitally important. And yes, there's losses in the grid, and yes. But every time I hear of there's enormous losses in the grid, you then hear of the mad Japanese man who's doing the super cooled cable that's going across the Mediterranean that will use huge amounts of energy to keep it super cooled, but the energy is coming from solar panels. I've just been in Morocco. What they're doing in Morocco is genuinely remarkable, and in the United States similarly. When you see industrial scale renewable plants, I think that becomes very exciting. So we went to in the BBC show, a plant that produces electricity from reflected solar heating oil. They've just opened a new plant, since, of course, always after you've been there, which runs 24 hours a day. So it heats up a massive tank of oil. I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions of gallons of oil that's at 1,500 degrees centigrade, buried in the desert, and that runs turbines all night. That's doable now. Now you need a desert. We haven't got a lot of that in this country, but there's other alternative technology, and it's clearly this is really going from my experience in the village. Is once people understand, I can buy 4 watts of electricity off you without doing anything. Micro payments all the time because my solar's working and yours isn't because it's under a tree, but the big solar on the barn is working, but the wind turbine isn't going because it's not windy, but then tomorrow it is, and that we've all got batteries in our houses. A picture starts to emerge which is very radically different and puts the traditional energy companies. I'm fascinated by that disruption, and also very happy and proud that Fully Charged was sponsored by British Gas, who clearly have a very good insight into this. That transition is very important for big companies. I think it is disruptive.
But on that point, they're still heating up oil, aren't they? Even though they're using renewable
Well, they're
sources.
heating up a form of oil.
Exactly.
Yeah, but they're not burning it. So they use the same oil
But
for years.
what I'm trying to get at is that, are we going to see a new source? Someone's going to come up with, whether it's fusion, perpetual, whatever, or are we really seeing that we're just going to find ways of using fossil fuels better and integrating renewable energy into it?
I think so.
I don't know. Gab?
So we may find new technology may develop, but right now the biggest step change and the lowest cost is to get more integrated with what we've got. So it's not necessarily finding new capacity of fossil fuel. I think that wherever the peak oil date is in the diary over the next 10 to 20 years.
It was last year, it was the year before.
Wherever it is. I think the step change now is the fact that solar and wind and battery storage has now got to a tipping point where it can be economic even without feed-in tariffs, even without other incentives, because the local value of having an asset there, the decentralized value, pays back versus what would have been the traditional system of having large central planning. So that tipping point has already happened to a point where the most value is created by getting data and insights across the network to share across the grid to lower those costs. And so when you go to have a look around, you'll see that there's lots of technologies out there already taking advantage of data, of sensors, of advancements in the efficiency of storage, of CHP, the ability to trade that back and export that back in the market, as to enable, you're right, a transition of where in 10 or 20 years' time what a supplier is, we don't know, because if you're a large hospital and you oversize your energy centre now, you have the ability to provide energy to the local care home and the local community, if that's what you want to do. And so that's available today if you wanted to do that.
Are you going to have to change your name? Dong recently. By the way, if you don't know what Dong is, Dong was Danish oil and natural gas. They've just recently sold the oil and natural gas. So then there's just duh. So British Gas may have to change its name. Because if we are going to have this transition, I won't forward to that on the corporate point because I'm sure your bosses are here, but, you know, do you see what I'm saying? That the names of companies are having to change. What they were is having to fundamentally shift. What's your view, Stephen, looking at it out? You know, when you do analysis of that, and you guys get all those, I've been to London Bridge where they're all sitting there going, oh, what's coming up next? Is a new form of energy going to disrupt, or is it just the way we're using and managing and that interface between fossil and renewable going to be the big thing?
So there might be something in the future around, you know, I don't think any of us can predict that. What I would say is it's the mix. There will always be a fossil in the mix, and it's about the proportionality of that versus other renewable sources. Then you've got battery storage on top. Then you've also got new, I guess, items that are consuming that we don't know the uptake on. Electric vehicles being a classic. Autonomous vehicles, if legislation is released, what does that mean? There's an awful lot of variables in the mix that say all that's happening is new technologies will be adopted. The cost, as adoption rises, the cost will fall further. And then it's about how does that affect the mix. But will there be a role for fossil? Yes. I think we would all say there is. It's about, maybe it isn't going to be 100%, maybe it's not going to be 60%, maybe it's going to be less than 40%. You know, you can do all the math or the economics to get to an answer. But what I would say is that it's not necessarily something anymore that we'll look at in the realms of what's the UK doing. What I do see now more is certainly everyone looking to say what's happening in Australia, what's happening in California, what's happening in Brazil, what's happening in emerging technologies that we can then adopt and bring into the equation. And that is the exciting thing. That's the real thing that everyone's saying, wow, that's really cool. Because it's that mix, it's finding its way into the norm. You know, you look today, everyone in this room, we've used terms as a panel. We've used things like Internet of Things, data science, artificial intelligence, various other, what was it, pre-horse? You know, pre-horse. But, you know, it's all, you know, we're all comfortable with the language. We're all comfortable with an iPhone streaming this live. So I guess we're already living and breathing it.
Yeah. We're going to open up to questions in a minute. I just want to do one last thing, and I want to talk about that dreaded term. I don't know who came up with this. You probably know. Who came up with Internet of Things? Is that the best we could do? There's a bunch of things out there. Some nerds are like, what do we call it? Oh, it's an Internet of Things. But that Internet of Things is going to mean that all our ladies and gents here with their things will be talking to each other. Mm-hmm. Is this the biggest change that we're going to see with the energy world? That it gets so smart that I hate to use the word Skynet, but these things start getting super smart and going, well, I'm not going to turn on now because he's not here. And then you go, no, I actually want the house a little bit warmer. No, it's going to do itself. Where are we going with this AI and this Internet of Things? Because many people will see, there'll be devices you'll see out there today that are that smart already. Alex?
So it is a huge topic right now, and actually I think I'm right in saying it's IDC predict that 10% of the data on Earth will come from Internet of Things scenarios by the end of this decade. When you think about that, that's an incredible statistic, really, when you think about the plethora, the huge amount of data that we're already creating as a race on the planet. I think, to your point, they are getting increasingly smart. It's not a new thing, though. It's not a new topic. You know, there's been machine-to-machine around for a very long time. I think what is new right now, one of the reasons it's such a sort of a tipping point, as it were, within the market is the high availability of sensors of every different type, shape, size, and the relatively low cost of those sensors. Increasing levels of ubiquity of connectivity. So, you know, here at Microsoft, we've been doing some things with TV white space. So in sort of upland farming in the Lake District, you can't put a SIM card in it necessarily because there's no mobile signal. But actually, with analog TV now no longer being broadcast, there's actually bandwidth on the spectrum to be able to create a super fast local network that can then be bridged to a high-speed broadband connection from the farmhouse, let's say, or a local connection. And then I think increasingly people are really understanding the true value and the outcome of this, the opportunity that there's many sort of case studies of people driving huge efficiency and so on. To your point around AI, just bringing on from the Internet of Things, the IoT really only delivers value if you can drive outcome. Otherwise, it's a cost for no benefit, I would argue. And that benefit really is derived by data and AI. Now, you mentioned the Skynet example. People talk about that a lot. We are decades away from that sort of intelligence, I would state. I think that's widely accepted. Really what we're talking about when we think about what's called weak AI, don't like the term, but that's what it's referred to, versus strong AI, i.e. the sentient thinking being that's actually completely autonomous. We're really thinking about mathematical processing of data, and it goes back to the data science piece. The resources that you need to be able to take advantage of the technology that can drive that statistical output are data scientists, because it's a mathematical problem. So there is a huge amount of pent-up data that sits within a value that sits within the data, I should say. So I speak to many utilities, manufacturing companies who've been doing machine-to-machine for decades in some cases, and they've got rafts of data, but they're getting no value from it. And going back to what I mentioned before, cloud and AI allows you to process that data in new ways, perhaps using cognitive analysis, machine learning, and more quickly and more cost-effectively get insight and outcome to drive an action, drive an event, so to speak. So these things will continue to become more intelligent. They will, it's inevitable. I think we're a long way away from worrying about actually the thermostat's going to rebel and start doing sort of nasty things to us. Autonomous cars, people are a little bit suspicious of that because they think actually that's a robot. It's the same thing. It's fundamentally a mathematical engine that's actually driving algorithmic processing of data to actually steer around obstacles and stop when they see a traffic jam or so on. So I personally think it's a really exciting opportunity. The opportunity is there with the technology, and I would encourage you all to think about how you can exploit that for the benefit of your businesses.